Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm just going to jump right into it. Sometimes I get on these intro calls before the record button goes on and I realize this is just going to be a great interview. So I've got Rusty Gaillard on the phone today. Good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Good to see you.
You as well. I could tell that in your environment, you're bright and cheery and you're happy to be here. And I just love that. I already know that the interview is going to be great just from your demeanor and your presentation.
Well, thank you. A couple of years ago, somebody posed this question to me. They said, how do you answer when people say, how's it going? And, some people will say, well, so far, so good, or, I'm okay. And they said, why not you just say great?
Yeah.
Because our words influence our perspective on the world.
Yeah.
And, so I've really adopted that and really leaned into this. Whenever somebody asks me, how am I? It's like, I'm great. I'm alive, man. Life is good.
Yeah.
And sure, there's challenges and, there's obstacles and all of that, but life is good. So I really have made a deliberate effort to live that way and show up that way.
I've tried to avoid saying I'm super busy. Of course you are. We've all got great busy lives and we put ourselves in those circumstances. So I've tried to avoid that. I think I'm going to leave it at great when somebody asks me next time how I'm doing.
Yeah, which is good, because the story we tell ourselves becomes our reality.
That's right. That's right. Well, you live in an interesting part of the country in Silicon Valley. You drive through there, you see the major tech companies. I want to hear a little bit about your background. And it just seems like this, I don't know, the secret space that people tried to break into and most of us didn't. And here you are on the other side of some of that. Can you give us your background? And then I really want to dig into your website and spending time on your messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So I follow what I call the very traditional corporate experience. I went to college, got my first job. I decided to go back for business school, which was largely my dad really believed in that. And I said, okay. So I went back to business school and then found my way to work at Apple, where I ended up working there for 13 years. Mm-hmm. I started in 2005 before the iPhone was introduced. And I was there through the iPhone, the iPad, the watch. It was an amazing time to be at Apple. And Apple's a great company. And after, in the last 5 years or so that I was at Apple, I knew I wanted to do something else. I got to this point where I knew I wasn't going to be the CEO. I didn't really want to climb the ladder any further. And so I looked out and I said, what is ahead of me? What's next for me? Up until that point, there was always something that was next. The first job, the first promotion, managing people, getting married, having kids, buying a house, whatever, personal, professional, there was always a next step. And then at some point, there was no more next step that was obvious to me. And I was like, well, now what do I do? I don't want to just sit here and stand still for the next 15 years until I retire. Like, that's my next step. That's crazy. So I didn't want that, but I had no idea what to do. So in many respects, I had, was very successful. And you look from the outside, you're like, well, you've got a pretty sweet life, right? Working at Apple and living in Silicon Valley. And all of that is true. And there was a piece that was missing for me. Mm-hmm. Just this question of like, what am I doing here? Am I investing my time and energy in the right way? And I got stuck there for 5 years because I didn't know how to answer that question. I knew I wanted something else, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to change. So that's where this real place of being stuck came from. But it transformed for me actually quite quickly. And it happened in an environment where I was asked to set aside all of the reasons why I can't change. And I had a lot of them because, I had a good paying job. I was working in a prestigious company. I felt proud about working at a company like Apple that people recognize and know. My dad worked at a big company his whole career. And so he believed in that. I had to support my family, all of this reasons why I needed to stay there. And so in this very pretty short moment, this person asked me, like, what if you set aside all of those reasons just for now And just imagine, what would you love to be doing with your time? If you could do anything, you didn't have to worry about money and what people thought and all of that. It was in that moment that the idea came to me that I want to talk to people about what matters in life.
Wow.
And that led me down the path to becoming a coach, which I've been doing now full time for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah. I want to talk about Apple for a minute. You have a similar career path that I had in terms of working for a big corporation that's comfy, and people all say, gosh, you work for such a wonderful place. I worked for In-N-Out Burger for 12 years and was a part of the top of the food chain there as well. And I was unsatisfied. But, like you find this self-discovery, like, okay, I'm not satisfied here, but everybody thinks I should be. How do you get past that? Because I know for me, it was very challenging when the world's saying, hey, you're in the ideal spot.
Yeah, it is challenging for sure. And that's why you have to deliberately set that aside for a moment. Mm-hmm. Right. So and it's not something that's going to happen naturally, but you have to deliberately say, I'm just going to push pause on all of those voices that are telling me I should be more grateful. I should be happy. I should be satisfied. Just pause that. And it doesn't have to be forever. It can just be 5 minutes. It's just like, if I ignore that for 5 minutes and I give myself a little space to think about, what would I really like to be doing? Mm-hmm. What would success look like for me? Not constrained success, not what do I think I can do, but what would I love to do if I could do anything? That's the kind of creativity that you really need to tap into to find the new direction. And it requires the courage to block out the other stuff just for a few minutes.
Yeah. Tell us some of the things that you pulled away from Apple that carried you into this new career direction. I feel like In-N-Out Burger has been so many years ago for me, but those foundational elements that we learn at those core companies that are just, bigger than life in the environment. For me, it was about service and quality and things like that. But what were some of the things that you learned at Apple that stuck with you?
Well, there were tactical pieces for sure. But one of the things that I took away was the importance of relationship and people. Mm-hmm. Apple was such a fascinating company because it's too big. It grew a lot while I was there. And yet it's very, it operates a little bit more like a startup. There's not these official departments and you've got to go talk to this department to get this done. It's more about the relationships you have and the people you know, and that's how things get done. And that's how decisions get made. Mm-hmm. So it really was an emphasis on building relationship and getting to know people and collaborating. And that's definitely something that I've carried forward. And it really resonated. But it's one of the reasons I liked Apple so much. And there were super smart, successful people there. And I just like, that is definitely something that I brought forward. And that's part of my coaching work, is I love to work with people like that who are smart and successful and ambitious and still wanting that next thing.
Yeah, sure. You've taken the time to put on your website that you went through a tough 2-year divorce. And I'm sure that that's helped mold who you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to put that on your website and why that's a part of your history that's public?
I've really I've had a personal transformation, and that divorce was really pivotal in that.
Yeah.
Before the divorce, I would not talk about any problems in my life. I was like, I hid those, I covered them up. I wanted to look all shiny and perfect, put a good face up to the world. And then I got divorced. And there's no hiding that. It's public record, and it was challenging. I mean, this went to court. It was trial. It was really long and arduous and personally challenging. And as you said, I talk about it because it really did transform me. Because I went from this person who hid all of my faults and flaws to somebody who couldn't do that anymore. And so I had to learn, how do I get comfortable with myself when people can see my faults and my flaws?
Yeah.
And so it's on my website, and I talk about it because it was so transformative for me to find out that I can be okay even when I'm not shiny and perfect. And people can still like me even when I'm not shiny and perfect. So it's been so important to me that I lean into that, and I want to communicate that and share it with other people. And I feel like that's part of what makes me real, right? I mean, just going back to the beginning of our conversation, right? Someone asked, how are you doing? I was like, well, I'm great. And I am, even though I've had these past experiences that, you could call them a black mark on my record, if you will, or, some like negative experience, but I don't see it that way because I learned and I grew as a result of it.
Yeah. Again, our lives are a little bit parallel. I went through the same type of divorce after many years. And I think in society, we try to present something whom we're not.
Yeah.
And we're so much happier for being exactly who we are now and with all of our faults. And life is so much easier when you can do it that way.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, man. I couldn't agree more with that. And I will add, that doesn't make it any easier to talk about my faults today.
Sure. You know, we can dance around your past a lot here and some of these other things. I'd love to talk about Apple one day, but there's so much meat in your website and things that you teach. And I would love to walk through some of those for our listeners because I think, people get on, they're listening to their podcast, they're on their way to work or at the gym or something like that, and they want to walk away with something. And I want to be able to give them that today. And so in your presentation that you talk about 2 keys to identify what you want, right? I love how you say most people spend more time planning a vacation than they do planning what they want in life, right? Why is it that we do that?
Yeah, momentum in a word.
Yeah.
We just, we're creatures of habit. We fall into routine and we do the same thing today that we did yesterday. And we don't take the time to actually pause and say, is this working for me? And is this what I want to do? So making a few minutes, it doesn't have to be a long time. It can be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but making that time to stop and ask yourself, am I happy? And where am I not? Where could I be even more satisfied with my life? That could be work. It could be relationships. It could be your health, your hobbies. It could be in any area of your life, but to pause long enough to just ask, where could I turn up the dial a little bit? And then to get curious about what would it look like if the dial were turned up? What would it look like if I were healthy in the way I want to be healthy, or stimulated and challenged and compensated and rewarded in the way I want to be at work? So get curious about that.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, people kind of get stuck in a little rut there and out of they don't want to get out of their comfort zone. But once you do, you can find life on the other side might be exactly what you were looking for. And you didn't realize it because you didn't take the time to write it down or figure it out.
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday, and he called the word he used to describe this is the rocking chair test, which is to imagine yourself when you're, towards the end of your life and you're sitting in a rocking chair, rocking on the porch, reflecting on your life. And you look back at this moment and you say, what is the right path for me? And everybody says, all the research and all the studies say that older people, their regrets are not about the things they did. Their regrets are the things they did not do. Mm-hmm. And so most of the time you put yourself out at that point, looking back, sitting in the rocking chair, looking back, and it's about go do it, say yes. And I'll tell you, I used that exact process when I was deciding to leave Apple and become a coach, because I was nervous. Of course I was nervous, right? I was walking away from this stable, great job, but you have to realize if you don't say yes, there's still a cost to that. There's still a risk to it. And so you have to hold that in a different way. Most people discount the risk, right? They're like, oh, status quo. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. They stay in the rut, but you have to recognize there's a cost to that. And when you recognize that cost, that can help to give you the impetus to move forward.
Yeah. So I would say if you're a listener right now, put yourself in that rocking chair. And this is a great setup for the next bullet point that I saw on your site here. Put yourself in that rocking chair and think about what those next steps might be like. But you talk about visualization. So here you are sitting on the rocking chair. Visualization is so important. How do you explain that to your audiences?
If you've ever watched the Olympics, if you ever watch like the snowboarders or the ski racers, you can see it in them in particular when they're standing there at the gate